Picture a scene. 1860. A small, sleepy village in the Netherlands called Gogh-Bonger. It is gray, it is damp, it is quiet. A young boy walks past the local church. He is perhaps 7 or 8 years old. A shock of red hair, a very serious face. He pushes open the gate to the graveyard. He walks through the tall grass, past the headstones, until he finds one specific grave. He stalks, he looks down. He reads the name carved into the cold stone. Vincent van Gogh. It sounds like the opening of a horror novel, but for this boy, this was not a story. This was reality. He is staring at the grave of his older brother, his parents' first son, a son who was stillborn exactly 1 year, to the day before our Vincent was born. Imagine the psychology of that. You are a child trying to figure out who you are in the world, yet your entire identity is a replacement. You are the second draft. You walk around with a dead boy's name. You celebrate your birthday on the anniversary of his death. An impossible weight to put on a kid. That ghost, that first Vincent, never really left him, especially in the eyes of his mother, Anna. He was always the runner-up. The first Vincent was perfect because he never grew up. He never made mistakes. He never disappointed anyone. A perfect memory. But the living Vincent was messy. He was awkward. He was intense and difficult. He lived in the shadow of this perfect dead brother his entire life. That shadow set the tone for everything that came after. Welcome to History Titans. Before we unravel the truth behind the madness, hit that subscribe button and share this story. You need to witness what we are about to uncover. Today, we are not talking about the guy who painted pretty sunflowers. We are looking at the messy, complicated life of Vincent van Gogh. If you looked at his resume before he turned 27 or 28, you would not see a future genius. You would see a train wreck, an utter train wreck. By any metric of his time, and even ours, he was a catastrophic failure for most of his life. He failed as an art dealer. He failed as a teacher. He failed as a bookseller. He failed spectacularly as a preacher. He did not even pick up a brush seriously until he was 27 years old. Most prodigies are painting masterpieces by 6. Vincent started when most people are settling into a career, and then he is dead at 37. That is the window. 10 years. In 10 years, he creates 2,100 artworks. He completely changes the course of visual history. But to understand how, we must strip away the myth. Forget the postcard version of the tortured genius. Forget the crazy guy who cut off his ear and painted swirly stars. We need to look at the man, the relentless, excessive worker, the absolute medical nightmare he was living through. And here is the big one, the very real, shocking possibility that the end of his story, the suicide, is a complete lie. The idea that he did not pull the trigger himself. But before we get to that wheat field, we must return to the family. The dynamic was complicated, polite even. Theodorus, the father, was a pastor in the Dutch Reformed Church, austere, a fire and brimstone man, but ultimately decent, trying to hold his family together. Then there is the mother, Anna. She was distant. The tragic irony is that she was artistically inclined herself. Her father was a bookseller. She loved nature. She drew flowers, but she was emotionally walled off. The sources suggest she never recovered from the loss of the first Vincent. Our Vincent was desperate for her affection. He constantly tried to please her, but he was too awkward, too intense. He was not the child she wanted. The proof of this rejection is one of the most painful details in the story. After Vincent died, and even after he started to become famous, his mother and sisters threw away crates of his early work. They did not just ignore it. They threw it in the garbage, burned it, discarded it. To them, the art was not genius. It was just a reminder of their failed, embarrassing brother. It was clutter. Works that would be worth millions of dollars today were destroyed because they were viewed as the messy legacy of a son who never amounted to anything. However, we must talk about the siblings who did not throw him away, specifically Theo, the anchor, the patron saint of younger brothers. But there was also Will, the youngest sister, Wilhelmina. Her story is a tragedy in itself. She ended up in an asylum, diagnosed with dementia praecox, what we would call schizophrenia today. She spent 38 years in an asylum. For the last years of her life, she did not speak a single word. So when we talk about Vincent's madness, we must acknowledge this. There was a genetic loaded gun on the table. This was not just artistic temperament or a broken heart. This was biology. The genetics are loaded. The family dynamic is a mess. But Vincent has to try and be a normal member of society. He needs a job. His uncles were a big deal in the art world. They basically ran the Dutch art market, so his uncle gets him a job at the prestigious art dealership, Gogh-Bonger. He starts as a trainee in The Hague. Was he any good at it? Surprisingly, yes. At first, he was fantastic. He was promoted and sent to the London branch. He was the youngest employee ever to get that kind of promotion. He was charming. He was knowledgeable. He spoke multiple languages. He genuinely loved art. For a brief moment, it looked like he was going to be a success. So what went wrong? Where did the train go off the rails? Love. Or rather, unrequited love. It is a pattern we are going to see over and over. In London, he's living in a boarding house. He falls head over heels for his landlady's daughter, Eugenie Lawyer. He builds up a whole fantasy in his head. He decides she is the one. He finally works up the courage to propose. And she just looks at him, probably very confused. She says, "I am sorry. I am secretly engaged to the man who boarded here before you. You just missed him." That is brutal, and it shattered him. This is the key to Vincent. He does not just get sad. He does not get disappointed. He collapses. His entire personality shifts. He becomes sullen, argumentative, rude to the customers at the gallery. And then he gets moralistic. Worse than moralistic. He starts telling customers the truth. A wealthy client would come in, about to buy some fashionable kitschy painting, and Vincent would literally step in. He would say, "Do not buy that. It is worthless. It is spiritually empty garbage. That is not a great sales strategy. Welcome to our gallery. Everything we sell is soulless trash." Gogh-Bonger tolerated it for a while because of his powerful uncles, but eventually, they just could not. They transferred him to Paris. It got worse. Finally, they fired him. So career number 1, failure. What is next? He tries teaching in England. It is a disaster. He works in a bookstore in Dordrecht. He spends the whole time in the back doodling in the margins and reading the Bible, and that is when the pendulum swings hard in the other direction. He decides if you cannot sell art, he is going to save souls. This is the religious phase. The Christ of the coal mine era. He decides to become a lay preacher and goes to the Borinage, a coal mining district in Belgium. You have to understand, this was a place of absolute grinding misery. Dangerous mines, extreme poverty, black lung disease. It was hell on earth. Vincent does not just want to preach to these people. He wants to be them. He goes all in. He gives away his nice clothes. He gives away his bed and moves into a squalid little hut where he sleeps on straw. He stops bathing. He would deliberately smear coal dust on his face so he would not look better or cleaner than the miners he was preaching to. He would actually go down into the mines with them. He would descend into these terrifyingly deep, unstable shafts just to be with them, to comfort the sick and injured. In a way, it is incredibly noble, but it was also frantic. It was fanatical. It was performative. The miners themselves were a bit confused by him, and the church leadership, the ones who sent him there, were horrified. They sent an inspector who found Vincent living in rags, looking like a beggar. They basically said, "This is undignified. You are undermining the dignity of the priesthood." So he gets fired from being a saint. He is fired from being a saint for being too saintly. And this is the absolute rock bottom. It is 1880. He is 27. He has been fired from every job he has ever had. He has completely estranged his family, especially his father. He is starving in a Belgian mining town. He is a total, complete zero. And this is where Theo steps in. The lifeline. Theo, who is now working for Gogh-Bonger and making a decent living, starts sending him a little money. And he makes a suggestion that changes everything. He tells him to draw. He says, "Vincent, in your letters, you always send these little sketches. The miners, the peasants, the landscapes. Why do you not focus on that? Why do you not try to become an artist?" And something just clicks. It is like a key turning in a lock. Vincent realizes that maybe his true ministry is not standing at a pulpit. Maybe it is capturing the divine in the faces of the poor and the ordinary. He writes this incredibly powerful letter to Theo, where he basically says, I am an artist. He decides that art will be his way to serve God and humanity. But declaring you are an artist is one thing. He had no training, none. He did not know anatomy. He did not know perspective. He did not know composition. But what he did have was this ferocious, obsessive will to learn. So this kicks off the Dutch period. And if you are listening to this and picturing bright yellow sunflowers, you need to delete that image from your mind. We are in the mud now. Deep in the mud. This is from about 1881 to 1885. He moves back in with his parents in a town called Etten, and then later Nuenen. It must have been incredibly awkward. Hi, Mom and Dad. I am back. I failed at everything, but now I am going to be a famous artist in your attic. He starts teaching himself. He gets instructional manuals, like Charles Bargues's drawing course, a very famous academic set of exercises, and he just copies them over and over and over again. He is trying to learn the rules just so he can eventually break them. He is looking for a style. He latches onto the idea of the rough style. He becomes obsessed with a French painter named Jean-François Millet, who is famous for his dignified paintings of peasants. Vincent decided that art should not be polished and pretty. It should be rough. It should be coarse, like the people he was painting. It should show the honesty of their labor. But even while he is in this intense period of study, he still finds time for another catastrophic romance. His recently widowed cousin, Gogh Voss, comes to visit. Vincent falls madly, obsessively in love. He pursues her with terrifying intensity, and she gives him one of the most famous rejections in history. She just tells him, no, never, never. For most people, a refusal is a clear signal to back off. For Vincent, it was apparently a negotiation. He took it as a challenge. He follows Gogh to her parents' house in Amsterdam. This leads to one of the most genuinely disturbing anecdotes of his entire life. The hand in the lamp incident. It makes me cringe every time I hear it. It is awful. He shows up at the house. Gogh refuses to see him. Her father is there trying to get him to leave, and Vincent walks over to a burning kerosene lamp on a table. He shoves his hand directly into the flame. He just holds it there in the fire. He says to her father, let me see her for as long as I can keep my hand in the flame. That is not romantic. That is deeply, deeply unstable behavior. It is self-harm as a weapon. It is emotional blackmail of the highest order. It shows a complete lack of impulse control. Her father, quite sensibly, blows out the lamp and throws him out of the house. But it shows you that Vincent did not have moderate emotions. He was either at 0 or 1,000. And when that spectacular failure ends, he swings completely the other way. He meets Sian Hornig. If Gogh Voss was the respectable upper-class widow, Sian was the absolute opposite. She was a homeless, pregnant prostitute, living on the streets of The Hague. She already had one child, she was pregnant with another, and she was sick. Probably syphilis, definitely malnutrition. A truly tragic figure. Vincent decides he is going to save her. He takes her in. He takes her and her daughter in. He wants to rescue her. It is part charity, part defiance of his family's bourgeois values, and he draws her constantly. There is a famous drawing from this time called Sorrow. It is one of the most heartbreaking images. It is Sian, naked and pregnant, just burying her face in her arms in utter despair. But his family must have been losing their minds. Theo is sending him money to buy paint and brushes, and he finds out Vincent is spending it to live with a pregnant sex worker. Theo was furious. The whole family was. They threatened to cut off the money. They said, Vincent, you are ruining yourself. You are ruining our family's name. Eventually, and the pressure combined with the difficulty of the situation worked. Vincent left Sian. Did he ever regret that? Deeply. For the rest of his life, he felt he had abandoned her to the wolves, that he had failed her. It was just another layer of guilt that he carried, so he retreats, defeated, back to his parents' house in Nuenen, and throws himself into his work with an even greater fury. And this brings us to the climax of the whole Dutch period, the painting that he thought was going to be his masterpiece, The Potato Eaters, 1885. This is going to be his grand statement. I have seen this painting in person in Amsterdam. It is dark. It is gloomy. It is this family sitting around a wooden table eating potatoes. They almost look like caricatures. Their faces are so coarse. And that was completely intentional. He spent months on it. He did dozens of studies of heads and hands. He wanted to show the reality of peasant life. He wrote to Theo, I wanted to convey the idea that these people have tilled the earth themselves. With these hands they are putting in the dish. He used a specific color palette for it. He said he wanted to paint it with the color of a dirty potato, unpeeled. So it is all these muddy browns, greens, and blacks. It is as far from Impressionism as you could possibly get. It is an anti-impressionist painting, really. And he was so incredibly proud of it. He thought, this is it. This is the masterpiece of coarseness. This is the real deal. He carefully rolls it up and sends it to his brother Theo in Paris. But Theo, at this exact moment, is standing in the middle of the Impressionist revolution. Theo is looking at Monet's water lilies, at Renoir's sunny picnics, at Pissarro's bright cityscapes. He is surrounded by light, by vibrant pastels, by the celebration of modern life. And then he unrolls this canvas from his brother, and it looks like it was painted with mud and gravy. It must have been like getting a heavy metal demo tape when everyone else in the world is listening to disco. It was just completely out of step with the times. Theo has to write back. He tries to be gentle. He's always trying to manage Vincent's fragile ego. But he basically says, Vincent, this is brilliant, but it is too dark. No one in Paris wants this. The market has moved on. It is all about light and color now. This critique, instead of breaking him, actually pushes him. He realizes he cannot stay in the dark anymore. He has to go to the light. He has to go to Paris. And he does not just go to Paris. In typical Vincent fashion, he just shows up. In 1886, completely unannounced, he sends a little note to Theo at the gallery that says, Do not be cross with me. I am at the Louvre. I will be there until it closes. Come get me. Theo must have been thrilled. Surprise. Your intense failed artist brother, who I have been supporting from a distance, is now moving into your tiny apartment. It was a personal nightmare for Theo, but it was an absolute miracle for the history of art. Because in Paris, Vincent's eyes were just blown wide open. He finally sees Impressionism up close, and Post-Impressionism. He goes to exhibitions. He meets the avant-garde. He is having drinks with Toulouse-Lautrec, with Paul Signac, with Emile Bernard, and he meets a prickly, arrogant, ex-stockbroker-turned-painter named Paul Gauguin. And this is where the style just shifts on a dime. The mud disappears, almost overnight. He sees the Impressionists using pure, unmixed color. He sees Seurat's pointillism. You know, the technique of using tiny little dots of color to create an image. But Vincent does not do polite little dots. No, Vincent being Vincent, he takes the idea and makes it his own. He starts using these energetic dashes and slashes of pure paint. You could feel the energy in the brushstrokes. His palette just explodes with color. And then there is the other major influence he discovers in Paris. The Japanese one. Japanese art. This is absolutely crucial. At the time, Japanese goods were flooding into Europe for the first time in centuries. Our cheap ukiyo-e woodblock prints by masters like Hiroshige and Hokusai were being used as packing material for porcelain. People were just throwing away masterpieces. Essentially, yes, artists started collecting them. And Vincent became obsessed. He bought hundreds of them. What was it about them that grabbed him so much? It was the completely different way of seeing. In Western art, for centuries, we were obsessed with perspective, with shadow, with creating a realistic, three-dimensional window into reality. In Japanese prints, you have these flat areas of bold color. You have strong, dark outlines. You have unusual cropping, where a tree branch might just slice across the frame. It looked graphic. It looked modern, almost like a comic book panel. It gave him permission to stop just copying reality and to start designing a picture. You can see it so clearly in a painting, like the portrait of Père Tanguy. The subject is sitting there, and the entire background is just a flat collage of Vincent's favorite Japanese prints. He is integrating the style directly into his own work. But while the art is getting brighter and more brilliant, the man himself is falling apart again. Paris is a party city, and Vincent had no brakes. He discovers absinthe, the green fairy, high-proof alcohol. It was rumored to have hallucinogenic properties. It contains a chemical called thujone, which is a neurotoxin. We will come back to that. So he is drinking heavily. He is smoking constantly, and his diet is atrocious. It is basically just bread, coffee, and alcohol. He was just impossible to live with. He was argumentative. He would go to the cafes where the other artists gathered and just scream at them about art theory. He was passionate, but it came across as aggressive and insane. He was exhausting. Theo is living with this. Theo's health actually started to fail because of the stress of it all. He wrote a heartbreaking letter to their sister Will, saying, "It is like living with two people. One is marvelously gifted, sensitive, and delicate, and the other is egoistic and hard-hearted." The two sides of Vincent were at war. Vincent has to know this is not sustainable. I am killing my brother, and the city is killing me. He needs to get out. He needs to find his studio of the South. He had this romantic dream. He became convinced that the light and color of the south of France would be his version of Japan. He wanted to find that clarity, that sunshine he saw in the woodblock prints. So in February of 1888, he gets on a train and heads for Arles. And this is the golden hour. This is the period we all think of. Arles, the Yellow House. He arrives in Arles, and he is just reborn. He rents a small house on the Place Lamartine, and he famously paints it yellow, inside and out. He has this utopian dream of creating an artist collective, a brotherhood of modern painters all working together, sharing money, sharing ideas, living in this yellow house. And the paintings from this period, this is it. This is the sunflowers, the night cafe, the bedroom in Arles, the cafe terrace at night. The colors just absolutely explode. He is squeezing chrome yellow and cobalt blue straight from the tube onto the canvas. He is painting the sun, not as a yellow dot, but as this physical nuclear force in the sky. It is an incredible manic burst of creativity, but he is desperate for company. He invites Paul Gauguin to be the first member of his collective. He begs him. Really, he begs him. And crucially, Theo bribes him. Theo, ever the diplomat, says to Gauguin, who is broke, "Listen, I will pay you a monthly stipend and buy your paintings if you just go down to Arles and keep my brother company." So Gauguin probably reluctantly agrees. He arrives in October of 1888, and the roommate from hell scenario officially begins. It was doomed from the start. They were complete opposites, oil and water. Vincent was messy, emotional, and believed you had to paint from nature. He needed to be in front of the thing to paint it. And Gauguin was arrogant, fastidious, and believed you should paint from memory and imagination. He famously told Vincent, "Don't copy nature too much. Art is an abstraction." So they are arguing about art. They are arguing about money. They are arguing about how to squeeze the toothpaste. Everything. And they are cooped up in this tiny house during the winter, when the Mistral wind is blowing, so they cannot even go outside. The tension just builds and builds and builds. Vincent is terrified. He is terrified that Gauguin is going to leave, and that his dream of the studio of the South will die. He feels that abandonment coming again. Which brings us to December 23rd, 1888, the most famous night in the history of art, the night of the year, the night everything changed. Let us break this down. The story we all know is this. Vincent and Gauguin have a huge fight. Vincent snaps, threatens Gauguin with a razor. Gauguin gets scared and runs away to a hotel. Vincent then goes back to the yellow house, looks in the mirror, and cuts off his ear. Wraps it in newspaper, walks to a local brothel, and hands the package to a girl named Rachel, telling her to keep this object carefully. That is the accepted narrative. But there are some key details here that we need to clarify, and a whole other theory that turns it on its head. Let us start with the ear itself. For 100 years, the story was that he just cut off his lobe. Just a little snip. A flesh wound, as they say in the movies. It minimized it, made it seem less severe. But in 2016, a researcher uncovered a letter from Dr. Felix Ray, the doctor who treated Vincent in the hospital in Arles. And the letter contained a drawing of the wound. It shows unequivocally that it was not the lobe. He sliced off the entire external ear, the whole pinna. He left just a tiny little nub of the lobe behind. My God, the amount of force and pain and blood involved in that is just unimaginable. It is not a symbolic gesture. It is extreme self-mutilation. It is gruesome. The severity of that injury is part of what gives credence to the other theory, the rapier hypothesis. Rapier as in a sword. This theory was put forward by two German art historians, Hans Kaufmann and Rita Wildegans. They argue, based on circumstantial evidence, that Vincent did not cut himself at all. They think Gauguin did it. A sword. It sounds less like art history, and more like a pulp fiction novel. It sounds absurd on the surface, but you have to look at the context. Gauguin was a master fencer. He was very proud of it. We know from records that he brought his fencing foil and mask with him to Arles. The theory goes that their final argument did not happen inside the house. It happened in the street outside. Things got physical. Gauguin, either in self-defense or in a fit of rage, drew his sword and sliced. But if your roommate just sliced your ear off with a saber, you call the police. You do not cover for him, unless you make a pact of silence. This is the most psychologically compelling part of the theory. You have to remember Vincent's terror of abandonment. If he reports Gauguin, Gauguin goes to jail for assault. The friendship is over. The studio of the South is dead forever. But if he keeps his mouth shut, if he takes the blame, maybe Gauguin will stay. Maybe he can save the dream. That is some seriously twisted logic. But given his desperation for connection, it is plausible. And look at Gauguin's behavior. He does not stick around. He leaves Arles the very next morning on the first train. He never visits Vincent in the hospital. He never sees him again. He acts like a man with a very guilty conscience. Or to be fair, a man terrified of a lunatic. We may never know for sure. But whether it was self-mutilation or a fencing accident, the result is the same. Vincent ends up in the hospital, and the town of Arles turns against him. This is one of the saddest parts of the whole story. The neighbors, the people whose town he had been so beautifully painting, organized against him. They wrote up a document, the Petition of 30. 30 of his neighbors signed it, calling him Le Fou Rou, the red-headed madman. They demanded that the mayor have him locked up or removed from the town. Imagine that rejection. It is not one person saying no. It is the entire town voting you off the island. He was completely devastated. He was locked in solitary confinement in the hospital. And the doctors, Dr. Ray included, started trying to figure out what exactly was wrong with him. They gave him a diagnosis of acute mania with generalized delirium. But madness is such a vague, unhelpful term. What did he actually have? It is a forensic puzzle looking back through the letters and the medical records. But we can analyze the symptoms. He had seizures. He had auditory and visual hallucinations. He had periods of absolute crystal clarity, followed by total blackouts where he would wake up and not know what he had done. He also had severe digestive issues. So let us run through the suspects. Suspect number 1, epilepsy, specifically temporal lobe epilepsy. This was the leading theory at the time, what they called mental epilepsy. It fits the seizures perfectly. It also explains something called an aura, a feeling of dread, or a strange sensory experience right before an attack. And it explains a fascinating condition called hypergraphia. It sounds like a superpower, but medically, it is an overwhelming, compulsive urge to write or to create. In some forms of temporal lobe epilepsy, the electrical storms in the brain can trigger this intense, unstoppable focus. Just look at Vincent's output. We are not talking about a guy who painted on the weekend. In his final 70 days, he produced 70 canvases, a painting a day, a completed complex oil painting a day, plus letters. He wrote thousands of letters in his life, some of them 10 or 12 pages long, written with this frantic, obsessive intensity. If you look at his handwriting, it is slanted, it is heavy, it is rushed. That is not just artistic passion. That could very well be neurology driving the hand. Suspect number 2, bipolar disorder. This also fits very well. It would explain the extreme mood swings, the manic phases of incredible productivity, painting 70 canvases in 70 days, followed by these crushing, suicidal depressions where he could not even get out of bed. Suspect number 3, the absinthe. We mentioned the thujone being a neurotoxin. There is a very specific side effect of long-term thujone poisoning called xanthopsia. It literally tints your vision yellow. More importantly, it can cause you to see coronas, or halos around sources of light, halos around lights, like in the night cafe, or the explosive stars in the starry night. When you look at those paintings, you see these massive glowing auras around the lamps and the stars. We have always assumed that is just an artistic choice. He's expressing the spiritual energy of the light, but it is entirely possible he was just painting what he was physically seeing because his optic nerve was being poisoned by his drink of choice. That changes everything. It is not just style, it is a symptom. And you can add lead poisoning to the list. He was known to chew on his paintbrushes. During his worst attacks in the asylum, he tried to eat his paints. And the paints back then, white lead, chrome yellow, were incredibly toxic. Lead poisoning causes severe stomach pain, anemia, and delirium, all things he suffered from. There is also Meniere's disease, which causes vertigo and severe tinnitus, which could explain cutting off an ear to stop an incessant ringing, and even a rare genetic disorder called porphyria. The list goes on. So what is the verdict? The most likely answer is what is called a comorbidity. He probably had an underlying condition like epilepsy or bipolar disorder, which was then massively aggravated by malnutrition, extreme stress, heavy drinking of neurotoxic alcohol, and poisoning from heavy metals. It was a perfect storm for the brain. So after the ear incident and the petition, he realizes he cannot live alone anymore. He checks himself into an asylum, Saint-Paul-de-Mozot in Saint-Rémy. In May of 1889, he walks involuntarily. He is terrified of his own mind. He wants to be locked somewhere safe, where he cannot harm himself or others. Ironically, this prison becomes the place where he paints his most famous and most free work of all, The Starry Night. He painted it from the view out of his barred window in his cell. But here is the fascinating thing. The Starry Night is not a realistic depiction of that view. He could not actually see the village from his window. So the village is invented. It is a memory. The church spire in the painting is Dutch, not French. It is a memory of the churches in his homeland. The painting is a collage of what he saw, what he felt, and what he remembered. It is a completely internal landscape, and that swirling sky is just incredible. Scientists have analyzed the patterns of turbulence in that sky, the mathematical flow of the eddies of light and wind. They found that it perfectly matches the complex physics of fluid dynamics. He was intuitively capturing the invisible flow of energy in the universe, or perhaps the flow of his own chaotic mind, and yet, he hated it. He wrote to Theo and dismissed it. He said, "The Starry Night means nothing to me." He thought it was too abstract. He thought it was a failure because he had painted it from his imagination and not from reality. The irony is just painful. He stays in the asylum for a year. He paints the gardens, the irises, the cypress trees. But the attacks keep coming. He feels like he is in a prison. He has to get out. So in May of 1890, he moves north again to a little village called Auvers-sur-Oise. It is just outside Paris. The idea is he can be closer to Theo, who is now married and has a baby boy. The boy named Vincent, by the way, which was a very sweet gesture, but also probably added a lot of pressure. Vincent moves to Auvers to be under the care of a Dr. Paul Gachet, and Dr. Gachet is a whole character in his own right. He was a piece of work. He was a homeopathic doctor, very eccentric, an amateur artist himself. He believed in treating melancholy with art and friendship. His house was apparently full of cats and goats and junk. Vincent's first impression, which he wrote to Theo, was, "I think he is sicker than I am." But for a little while, it seems to work. Vincent enters another period of manic creativity, the final burst. 70 paintings in 70 days. He paints the famous portrait of Dr. Gachet, capturing what he called the heartbroken expression of our time. He paints the town hall, the wheat fields. He seems to be stabilizing, but underneath, the fear is still there. He is terrified of another attack, of being sent back to the asylum, and he is terrified that he is a financial burden on Theo. Theo is having some money troubles. The baby is sick. Vincent feels like a millstone around his beloved brother's neck. And this brings us to July 27th, 1890, the day of the shooting, the day the story ends. Or rather, the day the official story begins. The official story we have been told for a century is this. Vincent borrows a gun, ostensibly to scare away crows. He walks into a wheat field. He shoots himself in the chest or abdomen. He passes out from the pain, wakes up in the evening, and staggers a mile back to the Auberge Ravou, the inn where he was staying. He dies 2 days later in Theo's arms. That is the narrative. Suicide of a tortured genius. But there are massive holes in this story, just gaping holes. And this is where the biography by Nafe and Smith in 2011 really changed the entire conversation. They argue it was not suicide at all. It was manslaughter. Let us look at the evidence like a crime scene. First, the gun. It was never found. No gun was found at the scene. And maybe more importantly, no painting supplies were found at the scene. If he was out there painting, and then suddenly decided to shoot himself, where is the easel? Where are the paints? Where is the canvas? None of it was there. Second, the wound itself. It was in the upper abdomen, the stomach area. If you want to commit suicide with a firearm, the most effective and common places are the temple or the heart. The abdomen is a guarantee of a slow, agonizingly painful death. It is not a quick exit. It is a very strange choice. And the forensics. This is the real kicker. A leading forensic expert in 2020 analyzed all the historical reports and the likely type of weapon. He concluded that the angle of the bullet was oblique. It entered his body from an angle that would be almost physically impossible to achieve by holding the gun yourself. So it did not go straight in, and even more damning, there were no powder burns on his hands and no blackening or powder burns on his shirt around the wound. No powder burns means the gun was fired from a distance. It means it was not a contact wound or a near contact wound. It was fired from at least a foot or two away. Someone else pulled the trigger. So enter the suspect, a boy named René Secretan. René was a 16-year-old kid. His father was a wealthy pharmacist, though he was spending the summer in Auvers with his brother. And he was a bit of a bully. He liked to play cowboy. He dressed up in a Buffalo Bill costume. And crucially, he carried a small caliber malfunctioning pistol. He and his friends tormented Vincent. Vincent was the local eccentric, the weird painter. They put salt in his coffee, put a snake in his paint box. They would buy him drinks just to watch him get drunk and then laugh at him. Just cruel teenage bullying. So the theory is that on that Sunday afternoon, Vincent is out walking. René and his brother are out playing cowboy with his faulty gun. Maybe they were teasing him. Maybe they were just waving the gun around, trying to scare him. The gun, which was old and known to be faulty, goes off. Bang. Vincent falls. And the boys, being teenage boys, they panic. They run. Vincent is bleeding, wounded. He eventually gets up and staggers back to the inn. The police are called. They come to his bedside and they ask him, "Did you do this to yourself?" And Vincent gives a very strange answer. He says, "I believe so." And he adds, "Do not accuse anyone else. I wanted to kill myself. Do not accuse anyone else." That is a very specific, very odd thing to say if you have just shot yourself. Why would you say that? The theory is that in that moment, lying there bleeding, Vincent made a decision. He decided to take the bullet. Literally and metaphorically. He looked at his life. He was sick. He felt he was a burden to Theo. Here was a way out. And if he took the blame, if he called the accident a suicide, he saves the 16-year-old kid from going to prison for manslaughter. It is an act of martyrdom. It fits his personality perfectly. The Christ of the coal mine takes the sins of the boy upon himself. He dies to save the kid, and in his mind, to finally free his brother from the burden of caring for him. He dies on July 29th. Theo rushes to his side and holds his hand. He is apparently smoking his pipe in bed right up until the end, and his last words. The sadness will last forever. And then the final crushing tragedy of the story. Theo. Theo could not survive without him. He already had syphilis, which is a death sentence, but the grief just completely shattered his mind and body. He died just 6 months after Vincent, They are buried side by side in over. So picture the scene now. It is 1891. Vincent is dead. Theo is dead. And we are left with Theo's widow, a 28-year-old woman named Joe Van Gogh-Bonger. Imagine being Joe. Your husband is dead. Your brother-in-law, who you barely knew, is dead. You have a newborn baby, also named Vincent, and you are left with a tiny apartment in Paris that is stacked floor to ceiling with hundreds of canvases, hundreds of paintings that everyone, all the experts, are telling you are worthless. They literally told her to burn them. Art critics, dealers, her own family. They said, "This stuff is garbage. The paint is too thick. The colors are crazy. Just burn them and get on with your life." But she did not. And this is the part of the story that just gives me chills, because she could have walked away. She could have had a normal, quiet life. Instead, she became the unsung hero of modern art. She became the CEO of Van Gogh Incorporated. She moved back to the Netherlands, opened a boarding house to pay the bills, and every single night after the guests were asleep, she got to work on the Vincent project. What was her strategy? She was a genius. She realized that the paintings on their own were too strange, too shocking for people to understand. They needed the context. They needed the story. So she started reading the letters, the massive correspondence between Vincent and Theo. And she saw the man behind the paintings. She saw his soul. She saw the articulate, intelligent, suffering, brilliant man behind the thick paint. She started to meticulously edit and organize the letters for publication. She pitched Vincent not just as a painter, but as a literary figure, as a martyr. She essentially created the tortured genius brand that we know today. She created the myth, but for a good cause. And she was a brilliant marketer. She did not flood the market. She carefully released paintings to specific exhibitions. She loaned them to important museums to build his prestige. She created scarcity and demand. She relentlessly pestered critics and dealers to look at the work again. And slowly, painstakingly, over years, the tide began to turn. And the big breakthrough was the 1905 exhibition. That was the moment she organized a massive retrospective at the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam. It was a blockbuster. That was the moment Vincent van Gogh finally arrived. So it is not an exaggeration to say that without Joe Van Gogh-Bonger, we likely would not know his name. There would be no Starry Night mugs or sunflowers posters. His works would have rotted in an attic or been used as firewood. She, a young widow with a baby, and single-handedly forced the world to see the genius that her husband had always seen. It completely changes the experience of walking into a museum and seeing one of his paintings. You are not just looking at a canvas. You are looking at a legacy that was fought for, tooth and nail, by a woman who refused to let it die. The brilliant yellow in those paintings shines because she spent her life polishing it for the world to see. Well, this has been quite a journey, from a child staring at his own gravestone in Gogh-Bonger to a wheat field in Overs and beyond. It is a tragedy, there is no doubt. But thanks to Joe, it is a tragedy with a triumphant final act. The sadness will last forever, he said, and maybe for him it did. But because of her, the beauty lasts forever too. If you want to dive even deeper into history's most misunderstood figures, the ones whose stories are so much more complicated than you think, make sure you are subscribed to the History Titans channel. We have got some incredible stories coming up that you absolutely will not want to miss. And hey, hit that like button if you think Joe Van Gogh-Bonger deserves her own statue. I certainly do, maybe even her own deep dive. Share this discussion with a friend who loves art but needs to know the real, complicated story behind the ear. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time.